I discovered my cousin secretly recorded me, stole my money, and manipulated everyone I trusted. I was staring at my own signature on a loan document for $78,000, and I swear on my life, I never signed it. The room smelled faintly of pine air freshener and cheap coffee. It was a holiday evening in December 24th, 2019, 8:17 p.m, and I was sitting across from a man in a grey suit at the First National Bank branch in downtown Phoenix. He slid the papers toward me, his tone flat. "Mr. Halpern, the debt is under your name. These withdrawals are tied to your social." My throat felt dry. "That's not my handwriting," I whispered. My hands were trembling so hard I could hear my watch rattling. That was the moment I realised my life had been stolen from me piece by piece, by someone I once trusted more than my own affection. What led me there? 2 months earlier, I'd been rebuilding my life after the divorce. I'd moved into a small apartment off 22nd Street, paying $1,200 rent and trying to find peace in routines, early gym, black coffee, late night journaling. I thought I was getting stronger. My cousin Charles had been helping with my taxes and some online account. We'd grown up together. He knew my passwords from when we were kids, back when our biggest secrets were old letters in the shoebox we hid behind Grandma's Venice. That night, the air outside the bank bit at my face. I remember thinking about that shoebox, how innocent those days were, when trust still meant something. Now, it was a word that tasted like blood and metal. Charles had always been the charming one. He had the kind of smile that could open doors, talk his way out of parking tickets, or convince you he was doing you a favour when he wasn't. I used to envy him. I never thought he'd be the reason I'd lose everything. We'd last seen each other at a family barbecue the previous summer. He'd been bragging about his crypto business, saying he was helping people build wealth. I didn't pay much attention, I was still raw from the divorce. My sister Catherine had warned me. "Eric, he's always got some angle," she said, licking ice cream sundae from her spoon while we sat in her backyard, kids running through sprinklers. "Don't mix money with family." I'd laughed it off. If I'd listened, maybe I wouldn't have ended up in that freezing bank office months later, staring at forged documents that bore my name. First red flag came quietly, a letter I almost threw away. It was from a credit card company I didn't use, thanking me for opening an account. I remember holding it under the dim kitchen light, the paper warm from my hands. I called Charles that night. "Hey, did you open something in my name?" "Of course not, man," he said, chuckling. He probably signed up online and forgot. That easy tone, that casual laugh had disarmed me. I wanted to believe him. After the divorce, I needed to believe someone. But then came the emails, the welcome messages, the notifications of withdrawals I hadn't made. My anxiety attack started soon after. The first one hit at work. I was presenting a logistics plan to a client when suddenly my vision tunneled. My heart hammered so violently I thought I was dying. My coworker found me collapsed in the restroom, drenched in sweat. The doctor called it panic disorder. "Stress-induced," he said, handing me a pamphlet. "Try therapy, limit caffeine." But how do you limit stress when your entire identity is dissolving in real time? It wasn't just financial chaos, it was social, too. At the gym, whispers followed me. I caught fragments. "That's a guy under investigation. He scammed his own company." Someone posted about me on a local Facebook group aware of Eric H. The shame burned like acid. I stopped going out altogether. My world shrank to my apartment, my therapist's office, and the occasional phone call with Catherine, who never stopped checking in. "I don't know who I am anymore," I told her once, my voice cracking. She sighed. "You're still you, Eric. He can't take that." But it didn't feel true. Every piece of my life, job, bank, social circle was tainted. It was like watching a film of my own life being rewritten by someone else's hand. Then came the night that changed everything, the one that led me to the bank. I got an alert from my old email account, the one I hadn't used in years. Someone was trying to access it from a new device. When I logged in, my heart froze. There were dozens of messages between Charles and someone named M discussing wire transfers, loans, and forged ID, all under my name. My hands shook so violently I could barely type. The last message read, "He'll never know until it's too late. The bank manager's already in." I remember staring at that sentence, reading it over and over. That's when I realized it wasn't just Charles. This wasn't one betrayal. It was a network. A trap. And I was already caught in it. The night I read that email, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table until sunrise, staring at the screen while the world outside slowly brightened into pale gold. The pine air freshener on the counter smelled sickly sweet, almost mocking. By 6:00 a.m., I'd made a decision. I had to confront Charles. When he answered my call, his voice was syrupy calm. "Eric, man, you sound tense. You okay?" "I saw the emails, Charles. I know about the loans, the fake accounts." Silence. Then a short laugh. "You've always been paranoid. You should get that checked out." And then a click. He hung up. Something inside me broke right then. It wasn't just anger. It was the realization that I'd been erased. Every time I doubted myself, every panic attack, every sleepless night, he'd been behind it, orchestrating chaos from the shadows. That day I drove straight to Catherine's house. She met me at the door in her robe, her hair messy, eyes full of worry. "What happened?" I handed her my phone. She scrolled through the messages, her expression tightening. "Oh my God, Eric," she whispered. "You have to go to the police." But when we did, they told me to gather more proof. Apparently, screenshots weren't enough. Identity theft cases are complicated, the officer said, tapping his pen against a phone. We'll open a file, but don't expect quick results. I remember walking out of that precinct feeling smaller than I ever had. Charles wasn't just stealing my money, he was rewriting reality, and no one believed me. After the divorce, I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone again. My ex-wife, Alison, had left after years of me prioritizing work over her. You're never here, she'd said during one of our last arguments. Even when you are. She wasn't wrong. I'd built a business that consumed me in logistics consulting for small companies, and when the marriage collapsed, I threw myself into rebuilding. That's when Charles swooped in with help. Taxes, business accounts, banking, all the things I didn't have the energy to manage. Now, I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. The nightmares started around that time. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing over me. Once, I actually heard whispering of my own name repeated in a voice that sounded like Charles's. Therapy helped a little. My therapist, Dr. Lemke, said my brain was rewiring itself around trauma. I didn't know what that meant, only that it hurt. She made me start writing again. Get it out of your head, she said. Put it on paper. You can't fight shadows unless you see them. So I began journaling. At first, it was just fragments of panic again, 2:37 a.m. Can't breathe. But over time, the entries formed patterns, timelines, connections I hadn't noticed before. I realized that every time I trusted someone new, a landlord, a coworker, even a date, something suspicious would happen soon after. Leaked in for random calls, accidental bank errors. I was living inside a spiderweb, and Charles was the spider. That's when Matt came back into my life. He'd been my best friend in college, the kind of guy who'd show up at 3 a.m. with talkers and zero judgment. I hadn't talked to him in years, but he found me through Catherine. Dude, he said when we met for coffee, you look like Gal. I feel like it. We talked for hours. I told him everything, the forged loans, the panic attacks, the whispers at the gym. When I mentioned the email about the bank manager, he leaned forward, eyes sharp. You need to record everything, he said. Every call, every meeting, get hard evidence. If the system won't help you, build your own case. That advice would save my life later. Still, the walls were closing in. I started receiving phone calls with no caller ID. When I answered, I'd hear breathing slow, deliberate. Once, a voice murmured, you should have stayed quiet. I stopped sleeping altogether. At work, my reputation was collapsing. My boss, Greg, pulled me aside one morning. Eric, the board's getting nervous. We heard rumors about fraud linked to your name. I know you, but optics matter. My chest tightened. You're firing me? He sighed. I'm putting you on leave, I'm sorry. When I walked out that day, the security guard avoided eye contact. In the lobby mirror, I barely recognized myself, hollow eyes, grey skin, stubble like sandpaper. The whispers at the gym turned into open stares. Someone even took a photo of me on the treadmill. Later, that photo appeared on a gossip thread titled "Scam is still pretending to work out." That night, I deleted my social media. I packed my few valuables, laptop, documents, the shoebox of letters I'd kept since childhood, and drove to Catherine's place. I didn't know where else to go. She hugged me tight at the door. We'll fix this, she said, but her voice cracked on the word fix. Because deep down, we both knew this wasn't just theft anymore. It was war. And I was losing. It started with a FedEx package I never ordered. The box was small, unmarked, except for my name scrawled in block letters. I remember the smell immediately, stale paper mixed with a faint trace of pine, like someone had coated it in air freshener to mask its true contents. My hand shook as I tore it open, and inside were USB drives, 6 of them labelled with dates going back almost 3 years. I called Matt immediately. Dude, don't touch them yet, he warned over speakerphone, the line crackling. If Charles knows you have these, he'll try something insane. I didn't listen. I couldn't. Curiosity overrode fear. The first drive was a horror show. Video files, hundreds of them, taken from hidden cameras in my apartment, in my car, even in the therapy waiting room. I froze in front of my laptop, the ice cream sundae I'd bought early melting forgotten on the counter. I recognized my own expressions of panic, my trembling hands, my tears. And then I saw him with Charles, smirking, clicking a remote. He had been recording me in private moments for years, using them to manipulate me, me into compliance. I gagged. My stomach lurched. Eric, you have no idea how easy this was. One video showed him whispering to the camera. Everyone will think you're insane if you fight back. I dropped my phone. The plastic clattered against the tiles, but my mind had already detached. I could feel panic forming like a storm inside my chest. Anxiety attacks became so frequent I couldn't work. Every time I thought of Charles, my vision blurred, my heart raced, and I felt like I might myself just to escape the constant terror. The worst part, it wasn't just him. A single email buried in the pile revealed the bank manager's complicity, approving withdrawals and loans, turning a blind eye, all for a cut of the gains. Every interaction I had trusted, every person I thought was neutral or helpful, had been co-opted. My world had betrayed me on multiple levels. Even more crushing, my social life collapsed. Neighbours whispered when I left Catherine's house. People at the gym stared and pointed. A local barrister refused to sue me after overhearing a rumour about fraud. I tried explaining, but who would believe me? Who could? My panic attacks made me seem guilty, paranoid, unstable, just as Charles had planned. Catherine tried to hold me together. She'd sit with me for hours, sorting through the USBs, her hand on my shoulder. "You're stronger than this, Eric. You're not alone." But even her presence couldn't stop the nightmares. Every night, I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced someone was inside my apartment. Therapy sessions with Dr. Link became my lifeline. I learned grounding techniques, breathing exercises, cognitive restructuring, but nothing could erase the memory of being watched, manipulated, and trapped in my own identity. I discovered a horrifying pattern in the files. Charles had been grooming others to participate. One video showed the bank manager counting envelopes of cash while Charles supervised. Another had a neighbour delivering sensitive information, oblivious to the scope of the scheme. Mine was bigger than I thought. The web was larger, more deliberate, more systematic. Matt stayed close through all of this. He helped me devise a plan and documenting everything, backing up evidence to cloud storage, preparing for a confrontation. I could see the toll it was taking on him too. "Eric, you're going to rebuild," he said, voice steady. "But first, you have to survive this phase. Don't let them win emotionally, financially, psychologically." The stress rewired my thinking. Every interaction became a test. Every phone call a potential trap. I mistrusted even friendly gestures. I'd see a neighbour smile and flinch, thinking about the camera Charles had probably hidden somewhere. I became hypervigilant, almost robotic. My therapist warned me that these were classic trauma symptoms of hyperarousal, intrusive memories, panic triggers, but she also reminded me that awareness was the first step toward recovery. By the time I pieced together the full extent of Charles's manipulation, I realised something else. He had turned my strengths into weaknesses. My analytical mind, once the reason I succeeded in business, became a weapon against me. He used it to predict my moves, to trap me, to isolate me socially. I had lost my career, my friends, my home. My sense of self had been shredded. Yet, in the rubble, a spark remained. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop crying, couldn't stop being terrified, but I was alive. I had proof now. And that meant I had leverage. As I stared at the USB drives, my chest aching, my hands trembling, I whispered to no one in particular. "This ends, one way or another. This ends." I planned it meticulously. Every meeting, every call, every subtle move Charles made was logged. Matt had wired my phone, set up cameras, and even installed a small recorder in the bank manager's office, every detail, in case Charles tried to slip away. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday, January 16th, 2020, at 3:15 p.m. in a conference room at a downtown co-working space. The smell of pine air freshener was overwhelming, almost suffocating, a cruel reminder of every time Charles had manipulated me with tiny, domestic comforts. I carried my laptop in a worn leather case, the shoebox of childhood letters pressed against my chest. I wasn't just armed with evidence, I was armed with the truth. When Charles walked in, he was wearing his usual casual charm, navy blazer, perfectly polished shoes, that smirk that had once made me envy him. "Eric," he said, voice smooth. "I wasn't expecting you so early." I ignored him, setting the laptop on the table. Matt sat behind a nearby pillar, hidden, recording everything. "I know what you've done, Charles," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "All of it, the fake accounts, the loans, the bank manager, the recordings, everything." He laughed, a low, chilling sound. "Eric, calm down. You're imagining things. You've been under stress, and maybe those panic attacks are making you see conspiracies where there aren't any." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. The panic started to rise, but I forced it down. I clicked play on the first video. There he was, my cousin, smirking as he watched me in my apartment, recording me without consent. I watched my own hands shake, my body trembling, the terror in my eyes. And then came the blackmail email he sent me weeks ago. "Keep quiet, or everyone you love pays." Charles's jaw dropped slightly. His smirk faltered. I continued clicking through the USBs, revealing emails, bank statements, and the recordings of the bank manager's complicity. You had all of this," he whispered, voice cracking. "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "And I've already made copies, uploaded them to the cloud. If you touch me or anyone I care about, it all goes public. The cops, social media, lawsuits, everything." That's when I saw it. His phone buzzed on the table. Matt had set up a hidden camera behind the conference room blinds. On the screen, I saw Charles typing messages frantically, trying to coordinate an escape. His face turned pale. "Eric, listen," he started, his voice shaky. "We can fix this. Tyler." I slammed my hand on the table. "No, you don't get to fix this, you get to face it." At that moment, a neighbour from the building walked past the glass wall of the conference room. They froze, staring in horror at the unfolding scene. I didn't care. I pressed play on the final video, the one Charles didn't know I had. It showed him coordinating with multiple accomplices, the bank manager, delivery neighbours, even someone I thought was a friend. All of them caught red-handed, laughing about my ruin. Charles's face went from smug to petrified. He tried to snatch the laptop, but I shoved it back. The neighbours, seeing the confrontation through the glass, called the cops. I could hear sirens faintly wailing in the distance. I didn't mean. Charles stammered, backing toward the door. But it was too late. The recordings had already been uploaded. The cops arrived minutes later, let him out in handcuffs, and confiscated his devices. Matt gave me a shaky thumbs up from behind the pillar. I slumped against the table, trembling. The ice cream sundae I'd brought now smeared on my notes. I could barely breathe, but there was a flicker of relief. Catherine was on the phone when I called her. "Oh my God, Eric, is he?" "I caught him, Kate," I whispered, voice cracking. "All of it. The cops are here. He's done." Even then, my body shook violently. Panic attacks still clawed at me, but the sense of control, even of fragile, temporary control, was intoxicating. For the first time in years, I felt my life inching back toward me. Every betrayal, every stolen dollar, every public whisper, now I had the proof to reclaim it. I realized the power I thought Charles had over me was only real because I had let fear dictate my life. And now I was no longer afraid. The days after Charles was arrested were surreal. On paper, I had one of the cops had him in custody, the recordings were in their hands, and the bank manager was under investigation. But on the inside, my world was collapsing in ways that no legal victory could touch. I barely slept. My panic attacks became relentless. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd curl into a fetal position, expecting another threat, another message, another betrayal. The nightmares were constant, in my apartment, whispering my name, laughing as I froze, unable to move. I would wake drenched in sweat, my sheets twisted around my body like ropes, the shoebox of old letters pressed to my chest as if they could protect me. Therapy sessions with Dr. Lent became my lifeline. I would sit in her office, staring at the Pioneer freshener she kept on her desk, hands trembling. "I feel like I don't exist anymore," I told her one afternoon, voice breaking. "Like my whole life has been erased and replaced with him." She nodded, her eyes patient but firm. "Trauma rewires the brain, Eric. Your anxiety, nightmares, and hypervigilance are your mind's way of trying to survive. We can work on reclaiming control, but it will take time." Time. That word felt cruel. I had bills stacking up with the $1,200 rent I could barely pay without the income from my business, which I'd lost. My credit was destroyed. Friends who didn't know the full story avoided me, whispering behind my back. At the gym, the whispers were louder now, almost accusatory. "That's him, the guy with the fraud case," someone said as I passed on the treadmill. I could hear the smirks, feel the judgment in every gaze. Even casual acquaintances treated me as guilty until proven innocent. The public humiliation cut deeper than any financial loss. I couldn't show my face anywhere without being reminded of the betrayal by neighbours, strangers, even my ex-wife, who blocked me after seeing a news article about Charles's arrest and the brief mention of me in the story. It didn't matter that I was the victim, the narrative had already tainted my reputation. I retreated completely. I stopped leaving my apartment except for therapy and essential errands. The shoebox of letters became my anchor, each envelope a memory of a time before betrayal, before paranoia, before constant fear. I would read them obsessively, tracing my fingers over the paper, trying to remember who I was. Matt was the only one who stayed. He brought groceries, helped me organise evidence for ongoing lawsuits, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. But even his presence couldn't prevent the spiralling panic attacks. One night, after a particularly bad attack, I called him, voice trembling. I can't live like this," I whispered. "You are living like this," he said softly. "And you're surviving. That's the first step. You will get through this, I promise." The social isolation became suffocating. Invitations dried up. Calls went unanswered. People I trusted, coworkers, casual friends, even distant relatives treated me like I was toxic. I started leaving the apartment only after sunset to avoid eyes, buying groceries from late-night stores, avoiding conversation entirely. I felt like a ghost in my own life. Even when legal victories began to arrive, if frozen accounts reversed, lawsuits filed against Charles and his accomplices, the internal damage was immense. I couldn't work consistently. My career was in shambles. My ability to trust had been dismantled systematically. The abuse had rewired my thinking so deeply that even innocuous interactions triggered panic. I would flinch when someone approached from behind. I triple-checked locks on doors. Every unexpected phone call made my heart race, convinced it was another betrayal. Yet, somewhere in the bottomless pit of despair, I felt a spark. A small, fragile thought: this doesn't define me. It doesn't have to. I started keeping detailed journals again, noting every panic, every nightmare, every flicker of hope. I learned to manage hypervigilance in tiny increments: a walk around the block, a coffee in a quiet cafe, a brief conversation with a neighbour. Therapy sessions focused on reclaiming control over my body, my mind, and eventually, my finances. I wasn't healed, but I was beginning to fight. For the first time in months, I realised that the rock bottom, as terrifying and isolating as it had been, was also the foundation for rebuilding. Recovery didn't happen overnight. I had to relearn what it meant to trust, to breathe, to exist outside the shadow of Charles's manipulation. Therapy became a structured lifeline. Dr. Lemp guided me through cognitive behavioural exercises, grounding techniques, and exposure therapy. Every morning, I would start with a single small act of making coffee, walking to the corner store, even writing in my journal about my progress. Matt stayed by my side, relentless in his support. "You're not a victim anymore, Eric, you're a survivor," he reminded me countless times. Together, we built a meticulous plan: financial recovery, reputation repair, legal accountability. Lawsuits were filed against Charles, the bank manager, and other accomplices. Each step was painstaking, but each small victory reminded me that the world wasn't entirely cruel. I started travelling as therapy, not escape, but reclamation. The first trip was a solo journey to Iceland in the spring of 2021. Standing beneath the northern lights, the frozen landscape stretching endlessly, I felt a strange electric liberation. Panic still lingered in my chest, but I breathed deeply, tasting the crisp, icy air, feeling my heart slow. Each sunrise, each midnight hike, each chance encounter with strangers who were kind and curious helped me rebuild a sense of humanity I thought I'd lost. Slowly, I returned to work, not in the same career I couldn't trust the corporate world yet, but as a freelance consultant. I established strict boundaries, separate accounts, encrypted communications, zero reliance on others with sensitive tasks. The financial ruin Charles caused became a roadmap for vigilance. I reclaimed my identity dollar by dollar, account by account. Even the $1,200 rent that once felt insurmountable became manageable. Rebuilding trust was harder. I was hyper-vigilant, second-guessing every gesture, every message, every smile. But over time, I learned to distinguish genuine kindness from manipulation. Catherine remained my anchor. Her presence was steady, unwavering, a reminder that family could still exist without betrayal. Matt became my partner in rebuilding life, our friendship cemented through fire and fear. The psychological scars never fully disappeared. I still woke from nightmares occasionally, my body stiff with panic, my chest pounding. But I had tools now, breathing exercises, grounding techniques, and most importantly, the knowledge that my past trauma did not have to dictate my future. I learned to sit with fear without letting it control me. The personal victory came unexpectedly. In Bali, 2022, I watched the sun rise over tourist rice fields, reflecting in the early morning mist. I thought of Charles, the bank manager, and everyone who had contributed to my suffering. And instead of rage, I felt clarity. I had survived. I had taken back my life. My strengths, my analytical mind, my resilience, my attention to detail were no longer weapons against me, but tools for rebuilding. I travelled to Europe, Asia, and South America over the next 2 years. Each trip was intentional, each experience a testament to reclaiming joy and autonomy. I learned to savor simple pleasures again, ice cream sundaes at tiny Italian cafes, the scent of pine in mountain lodges, handwritten letters from friends I'd kept across continents. By 2024, I had rebuilt my career, my social network, and most importantly, my sense of self. I was no longer Eric, the victim of identity theft and manipulation. I was Eric, survivor, traveller, strategist, friend, brother. The traumas remained. Yes, nightmares, anxiety triggers, lingering trust issues, but I had transformed them into resilience, lessons, and compassion for myself. I also became an advocate, speaking anonymously online about identity theft, betrayal, and trauma recovery. Sharing my story, guiding others through the darkest chapters of their lives, gave me a sense of purpose that no court ruling of financial restitution ever could. On a quiet holiday evening in 2025, sitting on a balcony in Lisbon with the aroma of pine from a nearby candle and a melting sundae in hand, I opened the old shoebox of letters once more. I traced the faded ink with my fingers and smiled. Every scar, every betrayal, every panic attack had brought me here. Stronger, wider, alive. And for the first time in years, I truly felt free.